Okay, perfect. So we're excited to have Yolanda Lin giving our last spring speaker series talk in the TN. So she'll be presenting on shared futures. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Yolanda. And folks, if you want to keep introducing yourselves in the chat, please do. And looking forward to hearing your presentation, Yolanda.
Great. Thank you so much for having me and inviting me to be part of this spring speaker series. Thank you also for everyone showing up here towards the very end of the spring semester. I know it is a tiring time, and I hope to have included lots of fun pictures and stories. So I'm going to be talking about Shared.Futures today, which is one of the projects in the TN. I am presenting this on behalf of a lot of people who've worked on this project. This is a list of co-authors who are on a recent paper submission that's currently under revision or under review, I guess. But I wanted to also highlight that Marisol Giovinto has really helped lead this effort within the TN, as well as help put together many of these slides. So though I am presenting, this is the work of a lot more people than myself. In addition, outside of just the Shared.Futures immediate project, we collaborate with Explora Science Center and Children's Museum. And this would absolutely not be possible without the many people that we work with there, including Joe Hastings, Hugh McDonald, and Julia Sackett, and many others. Of course, this is also supported by the Transformation Network, and we've also received a little bit of funding from the UNM OVPR. So thank you to all of our partners in this. Before we get into Shared.Futures, I'm going to talk a little bit about where I'm coming from. It's a question that I receive a lot when I'm introducing this project, like, how did you get started in this? So first off, oh, yes, Mindy, your hand is up. Oh, you're good. Your hand is not up. Okay. No worries. So I'm Yolanda, for those who don't know me. I'm seeing lots of familiar faces in the room, which is great. But I'm an assistant professor in geography and environmental studies here at the University of New Mexico. And I would describe myself as an interdisciplinary hazards, disasters, and risk researcher, and also a very dedicated cat mom. Here's Pumpkin pictured. But again, the question here is, how did I get started in art science? For a little bit of background. So I really come at it from a few different angles, but in all of my work, I have kind of a background in design and engineering, as well as more engineering. And because of my work in hazards, disasters, and risk, there's also a fair bit of earth science in there as well. And one of the things that I love being housed in geography is that I am able to bring in some more mixed methods approaches into my work, and incorporate social science as well. So we're going to go back in time about 5 years to when I was a postdoc. And my main topic of research when I was doing my postdoc was looking at kind of near misses and overlooked potential disasters in Singapore. And I was finding all these, again, near misses that had happened. And if not for a few minor to moderate changes in past events, that they could have been a more major event. This is significant because Singapore is generally known as one of the safest places in the world. They are generally not impacted by natural hazards frequently. And so people think that, like, basically none of these things are possible. So one of the ways that people describe these events, these sort of low probability, unexpected disasters, is with the term of black swan. So something that is sort of low probability, unexpected, impossible or difficult to anticipate. And as I started looking more into that black swan metaphor, I came across all these other metaphors. So there's like dragon kings and gray rhinos and all sorts of colors of swans. And I was having trouble keeping track of them myself. But I started jotting down just in a little notes document all of the various animal kingdom metaphors that I came across. And then I finally carved out some time to actually basically categorize these metaphors and make a visualization out of it. So here we see the risk zoo. So here's the black swan over here. We've got the lake of improbable, so low probability, and the consequence highlands, so very consequential. And then there was this very related animal metaphor that kept popping up, which was the black elephant, which people described as black swan plus the elephant in the room. And how they typically were describing it was, once you know about it, it's not about black swan, so it turns into this black elephant instead. So I was working on this, thinking about how these different metaphors are used in the disaster risk space. And then one day I went to get a cup of coffee and noticed in my latte art what looked like a nice swan. And I was like, that's cool. I'm working on, these black swans. And I think I was writing or something. So then take a break, go, for some reason I got up before really touching the latte. And then I came back from the other perspective. I saw an elephant instead of a swan. And it was one of these aha moments where, people, again, back to the risk zoo, a lot of people talk about black elephant as the black swan being transformed. And once you know about it, it's no longer a black swan because you know about it. What this little moment with my coffee cup showed me was that it's not that it's A or B, it's not swan or the elephant, but it is more of a matter of perspective. So same thing from two different perspectives, and that they can be, two different things to two different people. So I bring this up because this was one of those moments for me where I previously had maybe engaged in the idea of science and art more as just a way to communicate my science and to make that more accessible. But this was one of the moments for me where I really experienced it impacting also how I think about my work and how it informed how I wrote about these disaster risks moving forward. So that's a little bit of my origin story. You'll notice that this talk is called, we will refer to shared futures with the term ArtScience, and you may or may not be familiar with that term. So I'm gonna talk about that a little bit before diving into what shared futures is. So I just alluded to this a little bit, but there's a few different ways in which people do use art and science together. And you can think of it potentially as a spectrum where you have science communication on one end, where it's more art and design is used as a vehicle for science. So the science is going into the art, and that is sort of helping it move to broader audiences than it would otherwise maybe reach. There's another term called sci-art. I do use this term quite a bit as well, but one definition of it is that it sort of starts in the art space, and then, for example, an artist could reach out to scientists to get access to data or images or something that the scientist maybe has more exclusive access to, and they agree to share that, and then the artists can use that in their artwork. So it's a closer collaboration than the previous model of science communication. Art science is kind of moving the two closer together. So the idea to have transdisciplinary teams working together in deeply collaborative ways to ask questions and investigate the world around us. And the main difference here is that there is a feedback as opposed to it being kind of maybe an exchange just one way, or maybe a two-way exchange, but then it stops there. This is something, this is a term that is used to describe something that's much more intertwined and ongoing. And I think that collaborative piece is important as well. So before I continue, I did want to get a read on the room. So if you wouldn't mind sharing in the chat, or if you're feeling particularly engaged, you could unmute yourself as well to share what kind of science and art activities you engage in and how you might categorize it. You don't have to categorize it if you don't want, but if you could just share very briefly in the chat what you are, kind of what your comfort zone or what your current engagements are. Awesome. So integrating infographics and recent papers, that is definitely something that I think many of us who engage in research have to do as part of writing academic papers. But the audience for that is typically other researchers, right? So there's a little bit of a, that's part of the context that we consider when we create those particular graphics. Also infographics and students who are involved with science communication fellowships, which is an awesome program here at UNM. Maybe that can be a different speaker series later next year. Storytelling, workshops, poster design, yes. Figures and maps, all really great examples. Gonna hold out for a few more seconds to see if we have any other thoughts out there. K-12 outreach, incorporating drawing, STEAM family events for Native K-12 students and their families. I would love to hear more about that. Interactive mapping and drawing. Okay, so you guys are doing a bunch of awesome things. So I hope we have some time at the end to talk about maybe how Shared.Futures can interact with some of the things you're already doing. So hold on to those thoughts, but thank you so much for sharing. So what is Shared.Futures? I know I'm constantly posting in the Slack about this, but just in case you, so that we're all on the same page, Shared.Futures is an art science collaborative based in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And what we do is we bring together local scientists and artists through a 4-month program to collaborate and co-create research-based artwork that envisions possible futures. So we're really trying to merge the worlds of art and science and create this collaborative and creative space. And we really aim to inspire artists and empower scientists, and also do that in reverse. So empowering artists and inspiring scientists. Our logo here is meant to be read in multiple orders. A little bit of our history. It predates my existence here at UNM, but it was started in 2019. Many of you may know Mark Stone, but Mark, Tiber, and Marisol collaborated on the predecessor of Shared.Futures. It was called Science Meets Art, and that was more informally and on a shorter time scale, bringing together artists and scientists, and their work was shown in 2019 as part of the Resilience Colloquium, which is also sort of a precursor to the Transformation Network. Apologies if I have that TN Resilience Colloquium relationship a little bit off. But around 2020, 2021, I was joining the conversation here at UNM because I started as an assistant professor. And the TN was also being proposed and getting funded around 2021. And I kind of paged through the proposal and saw this Science Meets Art activity and asked, you know, who's who is leading that? And I was told no one yet. So that's kind of how I stepped into that space. And again, building on some of my own experience, primarily in like data visualization and like many of you shared poster design and other sort of graphical design spaces, but wanting to really deepen my involvement in the art and science space. So it was a really exciting opportunity for me. And in that first year, the 5 of us, Mark, Asa, Tyra, Marisol, and myself really worked closely together to define what shared features could be moving forward. Since then, we've had 3 iterations of shared features, 2022, 2023, and 2024, which is not shown here on this map. And we've also had a few new folks join us as organizers, including Lisa Hurst, who was previously part of our program in 2022 as an artist and joined us as an organizer for 2023 and 24, as well as Ashley Abadaka, who joined us also in 2022. So yeah, we host an annual program to guide artists and scientists through the collaborative process of engaging in and creating art science. And in particular, we prompt them with this idea of addressing creating, envisioning possible futures and possible solutions to addressing wicked problems, which are problems that are complex, nonlinear. They don't have a single solution, and there's no way to really test possible solutions. So there is a very high level of uncertainty. And the program is really designed with these 4 kind of frameworks and theories in mind. So we pull together a transdisciplinary approach. And again, I've talked about art science. We also look at this through the lens of possibility studies. So a lot of futures work, and certainly, where I'm coming from, which is the natural hazards and disasters field, there's kind of a stronger emphasis on probability over possibility. And so there's a tendency to focus on like, well, what's most probable or what's probable at a certain level. And so we're trying to break out of that space by focusing on possible pathways. And then the last piece of the puzzle is transition design, which I am going to describe all of these in a little bit more detail. So transdisciplinary research, I know, I believe the first talk of this spring was from Mindy Morgan, who talked about this in a bit more detail. But essentially, we need new forms of collaboration to address these wicked problems. They aren't necessarily going to be in one silo or another. Certainly, we're talking about interdisciplinary collaboration across, traditional academic silos, but also bringing in knowledge from community spaces and non-academic spaces. Art science, again, converging the kind of knowledge production or ways of knowing through art and science. And again, you'll see some overlap between these different terms, but not compartmentalizing disciplines and really aiming to integrate across different forms of experience. Yeah, so again, art science, as opposed to some other forms of science and art, is really focused on that integration and synthesis that is not as emphasized in other forms of art and science collaboration. Transition design is one that maybe we haven't, that I would guess you're less familiar with, so I'll spend a little bit more time on this, but this is a relatively new framework. I guess 2015, I feel like I'm getting old because that feels recent to me, but it's a proposition for a new area of design practice, study, and research that advocates for design-led societal transition towards sustainable futures. So there's these 4 components of transition design, which is focusing on visions for transition. So for us, that's the art science work that's being created, and also the conversations that go into creating that work. Theories of change, posture, mindset, and new ways of designing. I won't dig into all of those details, but a few of the key points of transition design is that it proposes a need for cosmopolitan localism, so being really rooted in place, but also being connected to, forces and events and systems at a global level as well. Again, really want to emphasize the need for that visioning space as part of the transition design framework. And then there's also this eye towards planning for long-term sustainable futures. The last one, possibility studies, I did talk about that a little bit, but again, this focus of what could be possible. So rather than what is or what was, really asking that question of what could be. So one of the ways that we've engaged in this is through a Shared.Futures community art waving piece from 2022, where we asked, what does our shared futures look like to you? What do you want to see in our shared futures? And we had people write down some of their hopes and dreams for the future, and we wove that together into this piece. So you can see that kind of being created in action. The really exciting piece for us by grounding in possibility studies is that it explicitly identifies the need for diverse and creative methodologies. So art is very much identified and included in this space. And it's described as the relational space of action and interaction between person and world. So with all of that floating around in our minds, what do we actually do? The program, as I've mentioned, is 4 to 5 months long, depending on how you want to count, but it's 4 months of programming, and then the exhibit is a month long, so 5 months total. It's open to all researchers and artists of all stages. We run our program in person, so it is limited at the moment to folks who live in the Albuquerque metro area. We've had people participate who are undergraduate researchers, graduate students. We haven't yet had postdocs, but we would certainly welcome them, assistant professors, and all the way through full professors. So no matter what your stage is, as long as you're doing research and your research relates somehow to a possible future, we would welcome that person in our program. Artists, we often draw from artists who are maybe part of the MFA program here at UNM. We also have practicing artists, professional artists from, again, the Albuquerque area. Some teach at CNM, and some, have their own businesses and so forth. So it's a pretty wide range. We try not only to pair artists and scientists together, but we also try to pair kind of a UNM person with a non-UNM person to the best of our ability. We do provide a stipend for participation. The current funding level is $500 per person, and then $200 per team for reimbursing materials that go towards their artwork. Sometimes, that might be also for like gas reimbursement or something like that if there's like some travel involved. But essentially over our 4-month program, we meet approximately twice a month, and it's 2-hour meetings in the evening at Explora, and we focus on different topics like science communication. We do some community building activities, rapid prototyping activities to get ideas flowing between the partners. And then, yeah, over the course of those workshops and the course of the months of the program, the pairs work together to produce a work of ArtScience. And then at the end, April, which is sort of the last active month, each of the teams are featured at Explora's Meet a Scientist and Artist event. And then their work is also, again, installed at Explora for a month, and they are featured at Explora's Adults Night event as the exhibit kickoff. For those of you who do not live in Albuquerque and may not be familiar, Explora, as I mentioned in the very beginning, is a children's science museum here in town. They have a really strong emphasis and mission on STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. And so partnering with them and building off of these existing events that they have, Meet a Scientist is an event that they do monthly where they bring in local scientists and they have booths and activities, and that happens on one Saturday out of every month. And so for our month, they modify that to Meet a Scientist and Artist, which is great. And then they also, approximately every other month, there's some irregularity in that schedule, host an adult night, which is what it sounds like. It's 18 and up in the evenings, and adults get to act like kids for an evening, and that's where we do our exhibit opening. But the work is installed and stays at Explora for a month so that people of all ages can explore that for a month, even if they're not able to go to adult night. So again, the main outcome of this is a gallery of sci-arts work or art science work, and really aims to communicate what our shared futures can look like. It is happening now at Explora. So if you weren't able to join us for adult night, never fear. You can go to Explora until May 15th and check out the work. So I do have a few photos from our recent kickoff, which was on April 19th, just last week. It was really fun to see our shared features group on the marquee of the Explora Theater. So as part of Adult Night, we also host a passport activity where we encourage folks by giving them this we call like ArtScience passport, and each of the teams and their artwork are listed in this little book that they can carry around, or a booklet, pamphlet. And then at each team is set up at a table. You can see one team here. There's a tablecloth and a couple chairs. And then if they chat with the team, they get a stamp. We do a similar activity with the kids for Meet a Scientist and Artist. And I have to say the adults are way more into it than the kids are in terms of getting their stamps and getting their prize. So it's a lot of fun to see people kind of embrace their inner child and really get into the event that we've created. As part of Adult Night, we also have a few other kind of bonus activities. So here's one example. We set up, how to describe. Explora has an elevator that looks like a living room. So it's like the size of a whole room, about the size of my office. And we set up a photo booth in there, and we had a little prompt. So we asked, how did the shared features exhibit make you feel about the future? And then we had whiteboards, and people could share with us how they felt about the future after seeing some of the work from our group. So just an example of the photo booth there. I think I mentioned this earlier, but we are in our third year. So here's just a few photos of our previous cohorts. This is from 2022, 2023. We have all of the work from 2022 and 2023 on our website. So I'm not going to go into detail on all of these pieces because that would take far more than an hour, but I do really encourage you to go to our website, sharedfeatures.gallery, /gallery to see these pieces. And you can click on each of these and they'll expand, and you can see more details about the ArtScience team as well as the kind of intention behind each of the piece. So by the numbers, we don't yet have the numbers from 2024, but just to give you an idea of kind of the levels of engagement that we have with folks at those events that I just mentioned. In 2022, we were able to recruit and support 10 art scientists, and they're, again, paired together. So that made for 5 teams. We had over 500 visitors that year. The structure was slightly different the first year. So Meet a Scientist and Artist was actually our big finale event. And that passport or scavenger hunt activity that I told you about, 80 people, mostly children, participated in that, and about 45 of them completed it. So that was really great to see. And there were a lot of people participating in it, but they just didn't get to all the tables. In 2023, we had a few more teams, so 7 teams and 14 people total. And you can see between the 2 events, we had over 700 people engage with our artists and scientists and the sci artwork. Off the top of my head, I don't have the visitor numbers from 2024 yet, but I had printed 275 passports and we ran out within the first hour and a half, and we kind of printed more while we were there. So at least 275 passports were distributed this year, which was really exciting for us. So what have we learned in these 3 years? We have seen really exciting impacts on participants. So I mentioned this earlier, but from the first year, one of our artists, Lisa Hurst, was really engaged in the program and ended up joining the organizing team for 2023. We've seen a number of our artist scientist pairs continue to collaborate moving forward. And I've heard, from both sides, both the artists and the scientists say that that partnership or being involved in this program has changed either the way that they do their work, whether they're a researcher or a scientist, or change some of the direction in what they engage with now moving forward. So that's really one of the most exciting outcomes that we've seen. We have been lucky to have continued engagements with our past participants, past cohort members of Shared.Futures. So at least once a year, we try to invite everyone back to meet the current cohort and build connections across years. I see a hand up. If you want to go ahead and unmute, please do. If not, I will move on, and please just let me know if you'd like to speak up. We've seen participants, by pairing with someone very outside of their own field and training, gain new skills. I'm going to talk about these last 2 bullets in a future slide, but there are potentially some challenges as well, but we'll save that for a future slide. We do ask for feedback at our public events, just for a sort of programmatic evaluation perspective. Here are some quotes that I've pulled from some of the feedback surveys that we've received. So this event helped my artistic-minded daughter see herself as part of science. Thank you. That was from a parent about their child's experience. The second one is from an adult night. As an educator, this event really inspired me for how I can bring science and art together in my classroom. And then this last one, which is maybe more representative of most of the comments. Very fun idea. I'm excited to see potential future events, ! As organizers, we've learned a lot in the last 3 years. There's always room for more improvement, but we're, maybe this goes for most endeavors, but always trying to do better and knowing that perfection isn't necessarily realistic, but striving in that, or aiming towards what's best, but also figuring out what works. As organizers, the 5 of us really focus on building relationships. So that's one of our main goals for the artists and scientists, is that they form like authentic relationships that can then foster and catalyze, that transdisciplinarity. But we believe that that starts with a one-on-one connection. And so we try to practice that as well as organizers. Because some of us are at UNM and some of us are not, and some have day jobs that are completely unrelated to Shared.Futures. So we do meet in the evenings, often over food. And Marisol had led a feedback activity amongst the organizers, just to understand how we were doing and feeling about the project. And so I've included some of the quotes that she collected from that. And here's one that just demonstrates, how we work together. So it feels like I know the other organizers as whole people and not just coworkers. I mentioned this before, but fluidity of roles has been a real strength for us. Having participants become organizers brings a totally different perspective than we would otherwise have, just as organizers who have only been organizers. During the workshops, we also tap participants who may have certain skill sets to ask them to lead portions of activities. And at times they've also volunteered to lead certain activities. So we really embrace that. And again, just to emphasize, it's a really collaborative space. So everyone's willingness to lead and support is a very important aspect. Things we continue to work on, honoring diverse goals within the group. For some people, getting their science out there is the #1 goal, right? And that is something that we do try to provide an avenue for, especially with those public events that reach hundreds of people. For others, it's maybe being able to monetize some of the work that comes out of this. So selling the work that they've created. I didn't mention, but the scientists and artist pairs do own their work coming out of the program. So what they do with it is up to them. We have been lucky enough to have some of the work donated back to us. So there is one piece, for example, that lives in the UNM Transformation Network student office, which is really, really fun for me to see every time I go to the office. And then, for others, maybe being able to present this work at conferences or at community events and so forth. So there's lots of different goals. And then I haven't even mentioned, Explore has their own set of goals as well. And so finding out where the alignments are is great. And then also acknowledging and doing our best to honor diverse goals where, it may not always be aligned, and figuring out how to navigate that is something that we continue to work on. The challenge and opportunity of time. One of the things that participants usually come out of the program saying is that they so enjoy getting to know the other participants, their teammates that they're paired with, but also everyone else. It's just a unique group of people gathered together. But on the same time, one of the other things we hear is that it is hard to carve out time for this. Again, we do meet in the evenings because a lot of people have jobs and aren't on campus. So finding that balance between providing enough time so that people can form, again, like genuine and authentic relationships together, whereas not taking up too much time. It's a fine balance. I don't think there's one answer for everyone, and I'm sure there's always going to be people who wish it was less and wish it was more. It's related to this later bullet on effort and resources. While we do have a stipend and we do have some funding for materials, it is certainly not perhaps as high as the effort itself. And so this is more of a, I think it's a symbolic gesture, but we can certainly do more. And we're actively trying to find ways to better support our scientists and artists to be able to participate, because we do understand that it takes extra time and out of their day on top of everything they're already doing. One of the things that I don't think will ever be like something that we check off as done, but communication between organizers and participants, amongst participants with Explora, all of these things are relationships that honestly need to be constantly tended and checked in about, how we communicate, at what frequency, who's managing what. There's so many different moving parts with this, especially integrating into Explora's various events and their space. So that's something that we continue to work on. And then finally, especially this year and moving forward, our program in the first year was already called Shared.Futures, but we realized we didn't actually spend necessarily that much time focusing on that futures aspect, and it was maybe focused a little bit more on just that art science collaboration piece. And so we are also, continuing to work on how to better build in some of those more theoretical pieces of the program in, so that all the scientists and artists have a good foundation in that as well. So we're nearing the end. How can others get involved? If you are here at UNM, we would love to have you participate as a scientist or artist. The applications roll out in the fall, and then we make decisions by usually December 1st, so that you're ready to hit the ground running in January. One of our dreams is that Shared.Futures can break out of Albuquerque one day, and that there's little, we've conceptualized it as like an aspen grove of Shared.Futures across the country, maybe the world. This is a long-term dream, but if you are interested, please reach out, where, we would love to have these sort of shared roots, but different expressions in different places. If you're not already following us on Instagram, please do. We have a very, very wonderful organizer, Ashley, who leads that effort, and it is awesome. So much better than what I could do. And we share events that are happening in town that are, either being put on or that feature our previous cohorts, or current artists and scientists. And we also share the work that comes out of our program in our off season. If you have any other ideas, please let us know. Our email is organizers@sharedfutures.gallery. You can also feel free to email me directly, ycl@unm.edu, but the organizer's email is really the best place to make sure that these ideas don't get lost. So with that, I hope we have a few minutes for questions, and I'd love to hear any of your feedback or answer any points of clarification. Oh, a question. Does this reach out to musicians as artists? Yes. So we have had a few folks reach out and ask if musicians would be considered. And the answer we think is yes. It would be different than some of the other, art mediums than we've had before, but we would certainly welcome that. And we would just sort of have to figure out what that exhibit looks like at Explora, so that it can be accessed in that space. But we try to keep a pretty broad definition of art for this program. I should clarify, we've had musicians reach out to ask, but then the application didn't end up coming through, so we didn't have the opportunity to fully explore that with them.
Hey, thanks so much, Yolanda. I just want to say to everyone, I went on Friday night to the opening, and what was really cool this time to see is the number of different pieces that were created for special places in the museum. They've done that before. Like there's been some sort of stuff like a video in a film in the theater, but I thought it was really, really neat how the teams really thought about this space. There was maybe 3 or 4 that were really thought through on this space. And I just want to say what a great job you've done. What a great job the past artist and scientist teams who many of you are here today. It just is very exciting. And I hope you guys do take the opportunity to go this year because it just keeps getting better and better. And it already started off really, really awesome. So thanks so much, Yolanda.
Thank you, Marigold. And I'm just going to have to share that Marigold is also a key part of our journey and helped us make the connections we needed to make within Explora to get this this ball rolling back in 2021. So thank you for that and for your continued support of Shared.Futures. But yeah, I mean, part of that integration that Marigold was talking about, it is really a testament to the partnership that we've been building with Explora. So we've had someone from Explora who's been coming to our meetings and really being able to work with our artists and scientists to help guide them as to what's feasible and not feasible in the space. And, you know, without that, we previously have been a little bit more conservative on the asks that we've, you know, submitted to Explore in terms of where we could install things. So, so for example, we have something kind of integrated into a circular window this year. We also have something hanging from the ceiling that needed a lift to get installed. And so those would definitely not be possible without that close partnership with Explora. So
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Yolanda. If other folks have questions, please feel free to unmute or share in the chat. We've got a couple more minutes. I did want to put a little plug to RSVP for the TN's annual meeting if you haven't already. So I'm going to post the link to that in the chat. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this talk, this is our last spring speaker series. So thank you, Yolanda, for being our caboose of the spring speaker series. This was great to hear. And if you have ideas for the fall speaker series, please reach out to Leanne or I, because we'd love to hear your ideas or suggestions for talks or what you would like to get out of these monthly events. So.
Hi, Yolanda. Thanks for sharing. I had a quick follow-up on something you mentioned. Can you share a little bit more about how interacting with your program or participating in it affected the artists and scientists going forward with what they're doing next? Maybe an example. I just wanted to get a sense of that.
Yeah, so you know, one of the things we've seen that I think is both, one of the more visible things we've seen is that the artists and scientists continue to work together or continue to exhibit their work together in other venues, which is really exciting. The other thing I mentioned is that, you know, one of the artists did join us on the organizing team, which I think speaks to like how she valued that experience. Because we're relatively new, we haven't formally reached out to previous participants to ask about some of those maybe more enduring lessons. So that is something that we're hoping to do maybe next year or the year after we have kind of a few cohorts that have been at least a year out, so that they can, you know, they have a little bit of time and mainly time and maybe mental space to think about how that experience has affected them moving forward. But yeah, again, I think some of the easiest things to identify are that continued collaboration, which I think can speak to kind of their experience in the program. But yeah, thank you for that question. Oh, Becca, would you mind sharing?
Yeah, so my artist partner, she had done previous research with some other snow hydrologists in Colorado, and she probably not a great representation to say that she had great background knowledge, so it made our collaboration easier, because that's really not the point of this, but she did, and we ended up having some conversations where she was asking me a lot of questions about these connections between snow, water, and food. And I was like, oh, that's a good question. I didn't really think about it. Like, maybe I'll look into that. So we ended up having a whole conversation where I ended up with a research curiosity at the very least, and maybe at some point, if I have time, I'll pursue the question. But yeah, I think we're also talking about doing things in the future too together, just with postdoc stuff. So there are multiple different ways that I think we've attempted to stay connected. She had a gallery opening, so I went to that, just something unrelated to Shared.Futures. So it does create a lot of what Yolanda was talking about, where now I have this person who we can talk about science and art with, but also like just be support for each other in different areas too, and practice talking about science and art together.
Thank you so much for being willing to share a little bit about your experience this year.
Absolutely. It's an awesome program. I'll just put in another plug to follow up on marigolds.
Awesome. Well, this was a great discussion. If anyone else has, things they want to chime in with, feel free to unmute, like I said, but it looks like the chat is kind of dying down. So want to make sure folks can head off to their next thing at noon or 1. But if people have questions, please reach out to the TN or the Shared.Futures program. Thank you again, Yolanda. This was fantastic and really enjoyed hearing about this project. So.
Yeah, and thank you so much for organizing this semester and everything else you do for the TN.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your Wednesday, and we'll see you all soon.